Chicago's skyline promised progress, but in the 1980s, just blocks apart, people lived in worlds divided by concrete and cold. While global headlines cheered for Michael Jordan, thousands fought brutal winters inside high-rises where elevators failed 1,200 times a year and families caged their balconies against violence. Why did a city build vertical prisons so close to its own prosperity? The stakes, and the truth, run deeper than anyone realized. Blueprints for Chicago's public housing towers promised efficiency and modernity. In the late 1950s and the early 1960s, architects filled city offices with plans for high-rise living, long straight corridors, stacked units, and open spaces meant to maximize sunlight and airflow. The Chicago Housing Authority was tasked with building a future where thousands of families could escape the worst slums. Early renderings showed clean lines and playgrounds, but the optimism faded as budgets shrank. By the mid-1970s, federal and city funding for public housing had been slashed by nearly 40%, forcing the Chicago Housing Authority to cut corners on materials, maintenance, and staffing. Urban historian D. Bradford Hunt describes how these cost-saving measures shaped the buildings themselves. Elevators were few and cheaply made, heating systems were undersized, and windows were installed with the thinnest possible glass. The so-called efficiency corridors stretched the length of a football field, with no sight lines for security. Each tower became a world unto itself, isolated by design and by neglect. Internal Chicago Housing Authority documents from the early 1980s reveal a growing backlog of repairs and a maintenance budget that could not keep pace with need. By 1985, 70% of units had outstanding code violations. The original vision, modern homes for working families, had been replaced by a system that warehoused poverty in vertical blocks. The paper trail shows how a city's ambition, filtered through bureaucracy and austerity, set the stage for mechanical breakdowns and daily hardship inside the towers. The hawk didn't just howl outside, it found its way inside the towers, slipping through cracked windows and broken seals. In February 1985, the wind chill dropped to -25 degrees. Steam rose from manhole covers as residents huddled in their apartments, wrapped in layers, waiting for the heat to come back on. In some buildings, the radiators were silent for days. The official work orders tell the story. 89 heating complaints logged in a single week at 1127 North Cleveland. With no repairs in sight, families burned furniture in the lobby to keep warm. At Cook County Hospital, emergency rooms filled with children and the elderly suffering from hypothermia. Elevators, already unreliable, failed more than 1,200 times a year. Elderly tenants like Evelyn Wilbin, known in her building as Miss Evelyn, climbed 11 flights of urine-soaked stairs just to reach their front doors. She told a city council hearing in 1984 that if you are old, you just pray you make it. For many, the climb triggered asthma attacks, or worse, hospital records show a sharp spike in respiratory problems tied directly to outages. Residents took matters into their own hands. When the city refused to act, tenant leaders like Dolores Dunn organized welding crews to cage in balconies with chain-link fencing. By 1982, over 100 units had these makeshift barriers, meant to stop both accidents and deliberate falls. Dunn told the Tribune that they were tired of waiting for another funeral. The cages kept people in, but they also kept hope out, turning every balcony into a cell. Mechanical neglect became a weapon, trapping people in a cycle of cold exhaustion and fear. On October 13, 1981, a sniper fired 27 rounds from an 11th floor window at 1150 North Sedgwick, targeting Chicago police officers below. The standoff lasted 4 hours, with 2 officers wounded and dozens pinned down behind their squad cars. Dispatch tapes from that night captured the panic, calls for backup, warnings about shots from the red high-rise, and the order to wait for SWAT rather than risk another casualty. The aftermath set a precedent. Officers stopped entering the towers without overwhelming force. Patrol logs from 1982 to 1987 list more than 45 assaults on police in Cabrini-Green, and union grievances record entire shifts refusing to enter certain buildings. The department never issued an official memo, but the message was clear. These were no-go zones. Gangs filled the vacuum, patrolling the hallways, collecting what they called taxes from residents, and enforcing their own rules. Retired Officer Roy Abbott remembers that they waited outside, and that inside the gangs had the run of it. Response times for emergencies stretched past 45 minutes, if help came at all. Residents learned to settle disputes themselves, or to pay for protection. In these towers, the vertical design turned violence into a spectacle. Bullets rained down from above, turning playgrounds into kill zones. The police, outgunned and outnumbered, withdrew. The high-rises became self-contained worlds. Fortresses, where the law rarely set foot. Survival meant learning the rules of a new kind of city. Inside the towers, gangs set the rules. By 1985, the gangster disciples and the vice lords controlled nearly 80% of the buildings in Cabrini-Green. Their reach extended beyond drug corners. Residents paid taxes for working elevators or for a promise of hallway safety. In some buildings, tenants saw more order from gang leaders than from any city official. Community organizer Linda Daniels remembers negotiating with local crews to keep after-school programs running, and she said that if you wanted to keep the peace, you had to talk to the right people. The gangs fixed broken lights, mediated disputes, and organized food drives, always with a price attached. Wearing the wrong color hat or stepping onto the wrong basketball court could turn fatal. The playground was a map of invisible borders, drawn and redrawn by shifting alliances. Yet even in this harsh environment, culture found a way to breathe. In the dark, pulsing basements of the South Side, house music took hold. The Warehouse Club on Jefferson Street became a sanctuary, where the mechanical beat drowned out the city's violence. DJ Frankie Knuckles spun records for crowds that crossed gang and racial lines, if only for a night. On certain weekends, even the toughest crews called a quiet truce to dance. Flyers for these parties circulated through the projects, promising a few hours where the only code that mattered was rhythm. When the Bulls played at Chicago Stadium, the city's divisions faded for a while. Michael Jordan's arrival in 1984 electrified every block, from the Gold Coast to the Green. Playoff games drew 18,000 fans, but millions more watched from living rooms and crowded bars. The number 23 jersey became a shield. Kids wore it as if it could make them untouchable. In those moments, the city remembered what it felt like to be united, if only for the length of a game or a song. By 1987, the numbers in the city's own files had become impossible to ignore. The Chicago Housing Authority's maintenance backlog reached $118 million, with thousands of unresolved work orders for everything from broken elevators to leaking roofs. A federal Department of Housing and Urban Development report labeled the towers unsalvageable, citing years of deferred repairs and chronic underfunding. In city council chambers, officials debated demolition openly for the first time, reading aloud from memos that described the buildings as functionally obsolete. Council minutes from December 1987 record the stark language, no longer about renewal, but about triage. The data left little room for hope. 70% of units failed basic code inspections, and the cost to bring them up to standard was more than the city could afford. Demolition documents began to circulate, stamped with the urgency of a system in collapse. For families in the towers, the prospect of demolition brought more anxiety than relief. A tenant survey from 1988 found that 55% of residents feared being scattered across the city, losing the support networks they had built in the stairwells and courtyards. From a caged balcony, the Gold Coast's luxury apartments stood less than half a mile away, close enough to see, but out of reach. Historian D. Bradford Hunt captured the contradiction when he wrote that public housing was supposed to offer opportunity, but it became a cage. Many residents weighed hope for safer homes against the certainty of losing a community that had been forged under pressure. The city's skyline, with its sharp divide, became a daily reminder of what was at stake. Chicago's vertical scars are gone, but the city's deepest divides remain. Today, as luxury towers rise where projects once stood, the lesson endures. When cities build walls, literal or invisible, generations pay the price. The question now is whether we are still repeating the same mistakes. Thanks for watching.